we look at decision making through the lens of a consultancy, what are the common mistakes that Deloitte sees in the market?
Oh, wow. Do we have enough time? No, just kidding, David. I would say that there's a couple, and I'll tack on to what Jesse said. Not only is it important for HR professionals to understand that pragmatism around the process actually outweighs the information, but also being proactive means to have those data platforms, be it OrgView or Workday or you name it, right? To always have information handy and at the ready, right? So when we're thinking about organizations, how they're performing, there's some pretty simple sort of metrics that we can look at to have at the ready to inform clients or be ready for these conversations. Number one, if we're looking at layoffs or restructuring, right, you always want to know where your folks are from a performance management perspective, however you do that process, right? Where are your low performers? Where are folks that are on performance improvement plans, right? Are those folks that have the critical skills that Jesse talked about, right, that may be able to be repositioned and improve performance, but also help the organization grow? That's typically an area that, HR can always have a tab on, right, to be thinking about proactively if the business is performing well or not, and how to, really push on what do we do about these workforce segments. The other areas, right, that having a platform can be helpful, understanding like OrgView or Workday is around span of control, right? Span of control around where do we see low spans of control, high spans of control? Is that really where we want to be driving the business? Now, doing that without context is a common mistake that we see clients do all of the time. And Jesse will start to smile here because the other side of it is also benchmarking, right? Clients will pay a lot of money to do studies around, well, my span of control average in finance is 6-1. Tell me what the benchmarks are for other organizations that have finance organizations, either my size or industry. Well, 6-1 doesn't really do anything. I know that, in SpaceX, right, a lot of trial and error. Elon Musk has not come out and said, boy, that 6.4-to-1 ratio span of control is why we got the rocket off the pad, right? So you really need to understand the context. So one way of doing that is HR professionals can look at is supervisory burden, right? Think of this as the actual human conditions that are creating, what it takes to manage that span of individuals, the interconnectivity of the work that's being managed or not, the repetitiveness of that work, right? The differentiation in skills and capabilities. Someone may have a span of control 10-1, but the supervisory burden is actually 6-1, which means that individual's under duress. And at Deloitte, we actually have algorithms that can work with platforms like OrgView and others to start to identify that. And if you think about that as a supervisor's blood pressure in managing work, oftentimes that can signal an area where we can start to make some changes in efficiency, because only 9% of organizations create enough capacity proactively to take on growth and innovation. The rest of them work as many of us do, right? They react to an event happening, they take action on it after consideration, and only if a meeting is canceled, right, do they get a chance to actually think, well, was that the right thing to do? How do we get prepared for the next go? So, those are a lot of things that we think about that are, opportunities where not only, I would say common mistakes in the market from a consultancy perspective, but also for our clients. At Deloitte, we're very much into now helping our clients understand the context of organizations. Why did they make decisions? Why for a time did Netflix have 2 CEOs? And we'll show you that organization. We'll talk to clients or others that have served in those organizations and paint a picture. Because at the end of the day, if you're making decisions around, if it's economic solvency or growth, you want to be able to look at the context of why other organizations made a decision and say, what's best for us, right? Because anybody can replicate a strategy, but it's very hard for other competitors to replicate your purpose and your culture and your true, aspirations for growth.
Yeah, very good. And staying with you, Don, what advice would you give listeners to build an adaptable and future-proof workforce, and how do you use organizational design and workforce planning to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first I would think of is, always be, if I'm an HR professional, I have access to this data and information, always want to be looking for either redundancies or overlaps and opportunities to be more efficient. right? And that's not just spans and layers. We think about being smart around how to organize and operate and behave in 5 layers, right? So we're looking for opportunities to be more efficient or less, what I would say, less complicated at the individual level, right? At the work level, at the team level, at the leader level, and then in the organization. That could be finance, that could be the organization writ large. And then the last is the ecosystem. So if you're a function within an organization, that ecosystem could be those functions that you partner with inside your company, as well as the vendors or customers. If you're the organization on the whole, it's an ecosystem play. For us in our relationship with OrgView, we have some solutions that we've created around network analysis and others on how people collaborate, but that's because we don't see a lot of folks using it, and we believe that that's an area where if more HR organizations and clients had access to network analysis, they can actually understand how teams collaborate, make decisions, how they team together. But for us in our ecosystem, we don't want to be doing scenario modeling products, right? So we partner with OrgView in a strategic alliance that helps us do that, right? So we're being efficient, and we're also helping and amplifying the impact we can provide to clients. The next is around, thinking about those 5 dimensions of value that we talked about earlier, and the data that we just walked through, and always be looking out for how to be hyper responsive to market needs, right? So looking at those networks of teams, looking at the barriers of the supervisory burden that can be identified through the flow of work, to use design thinking to enable the workers themselves from various parts of the organization to self-identify, hey, there's a little bit of an issue here on how we can work faster together, right? It's always important to balance, how adaptable we can be with also how efficient we need to be, right? Some organizations aren't necessarily set up for, being able to work in a network-based team concept. They work better in traditional spans and layers and hierarchy, and that's fine. But, we can model multi-hierarchical structures with people mapped to, different teams, right? Clients can show different data sets showing that, hey, look, this is our org structure, but if I was to map folks to a value stream of how we do work using tools like OrgView or others, you can start to see how teams are working together and how is that workforce mix looking. Does that meet the financial planning goals of finance, or our perspective on workforce mix being both inside, the organization, or as my colleagues talk about, on balance sheet or off? Right? We know that some organizations adopt an agile at scale model, looking at their operating models across and starting to do network-based teams at the enterprise level. Now, for those particularly foundations do a great job in this because their missions are around things like reducing truancy at school, finding jobs for parents, and then also making just kids' lives better as they raise them. Right? These are multifaceted but also highly connected issues. When they're working and organizing at scale in an agile-based concept, they can see things like 50% reduction in delivery costs, which is really important for foundations, or multiple increases in delivery time around supporting those events. So those are some of the things that I would think about, right? Is and whether it's a time of economic uncertainty like we're living through now, or a time of growth, it's about thinking, how do we organize, operate, and behave at the individual, team, leader, org, and ecosystem level, and what are we really after, right? Are we after the financial value, the product or service value that we're delivering, that customer experience, the supply chain nature of it, or agility? Because it can't be everything all at once, and as much as I love the movie Spinal Tap and Turn It to 11, right, we can't be chasing everything. Giving our clients that focus and giving their employees that focus helps them make better decisions to reduce the impact of an economic downturn and the layoffs that could ensue.
In this series, we will be speaking to a range of senior leaders who are pushing a data-driven and digital HR agenda. Make sure that you subscribe via your podcast app of choice, and also via our YouTube channel for free and regular interviews with the digital HR leaders of the future.